welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Welsh.
We appreciate all the support on our recent content. We're trying to move our way through these off-season breakdowns and whatnot. I believe we finished the Central Division, so now we're moving on to Brain
Yeah,
Fart, Atlantic Division. Yes, so this is going to be an interesting division, but before we introduce our teams, like we said, we appreciate every single one of you that it does like and subscribe. And please continue to do that and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the OBT Podcast for updates.
Yes, so this time we're starting, or now going to the Atlantic Division. This is our second to last division. And we're going to start with today the two New York teams. So the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets. And I think we're going to start off with the New York Knicks, right? So,
Sure.
obviously with the Knicks, I think they had a really good year last year. They had, for a while kind of stretches, where their teams just, felt like they weren't going anywhere, right? The organization felt kind of inept, but, they got their guy, Jalen Brunson, right? Kind of, came in and swooped in and took him from Dallas. Right. Obviously, there are a lot of connections there, right? In terms of, his them hiring his father as a coach, right? Obviously, the guy who runs the team, right, is pretty close with him, right? And again, that works to their benefit. So they got their guy, and he did not disappoint in his first year with New York. He was great. He was, pretty much their
Electric.
guy. Yeah, exactly. He was kind of their guy, that they really needed because Randall, is fine. He's a solid player, right? But he's not quite as consistent, as Jalen Brunson was, right? And just in terms of also some of the other stuff that Brunson brings, like the leadership, the intangibles, just like the comfort in close games, right? Where he seems like he plays really steady, really in control, right? He had a great season, right? Averaged 24 games, 6 assists, just under a steal, right? 42% from three, right? 49% from the field. So great numbers. And then, you go into the playoffs, right? Which he was pretty good for Dallas in the playoffs the year before. And he
Yeah.
was even better this year for the Knicks, right? Averaged 28 a game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. The 3-point shot was down, right? But still 47 from the field, 91 from the line. Um, so, the thing with the Knicks, they finished 47 and 35, right? So that's good. That was good for fifth in the Eastern Conference. They matched up against the Cavs. A lot of people picked the Cavs to win in that
Including
series.
us.
Yeah, including us. We picked the Cavs to win in that series as well. But the Knicks kind of outclassed them. They had a lot of players, in terms of size and physicality that they used to their advantage. And it was just, like they had, the guys like Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein crashing the boards, right? You had other guys like Josh Hart play a
Hmm.
crucial role, right? RJ Barrett during the second half of that series played really well. Jalen Brunson, we already mentioned, was great. And they kind of survived like Randall, who didn't really have a great series in that round, right? I know he had, an ankle injury,
Yeah.
that limited him in the playoffs. I believe he got surgery on it in the offseason because he had a bounce back regular season performance. Um, where he averaged 25 and 10 with 4 assists, right? In the regular season, compared to what he did the year before. But, it just didn't look as good in the playoffs. There was a drop off. But in fairness, he did have surgery on his ankle. So I'm sure
Sure.
that probably contributed, to his performance, even though historically it just doesn't seem like his game translates to the playoffs that great. A lot of one on one when, he's just fine player at it. But in the playoffs, I think you got to be able to do a little bit more. In terms of what he does with it, because he takes a lot of questionable shots, right? Sometimes kind of when things aren't going his way, it seems like, he kind of, I don't want to say quits, right? But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes the effort kind of dissipates. But again, like I said, I want to give him some benefit of the doubt because he did have an ankle injury.
Yeah. Like,
Uh,
I feel like we do have to give him credit where it's due because I think he
yeah,
did play, fairly well the entire season up until that point. And like you said, I'm sure the injury was nagging him. But at the same time, we do have to mention the fact that there were multiple brain farts where this guy didn't look like he really should have been in the playoffs on this team.
right. And even RJ Barrett, right? He had a really good performance in the first round against the Cavs, and against the Heat, it wasn't quite as consistent. He had some games where he was fine. In the last game, he was terrible
Hmm.
um, for most of the game. But it just again, it kind of shows some of the flaws with the roster, right? Obviously, for a while they kind of flirted with the idea of trading for Donovan Mitchell. And they ended up not doing it. They didn't want to give up all the picks, and they did end up eliminating him. So, I guess there is, some, I guess, kind of, hey, wow, this is pretty cool in terms of that factor, right? But, at the same time, it'll be interesting to see what they do this season, in terms of what they did, right? They grabbed Dante DiVincenzo, took him from Golden State, right? I think that was a pretty good signing.
Hmm.
re-sign Josh Hart, right? So obviously those two along with Brunson, right? They reunite. They played in Villanova or for Villanova together, won a national championship.
Yeah.
Um, Outside of that, they still have most of the other guys, right, from the year before, right? Emmanuel Quickly, Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, right? Randall, obviously, Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, Jericho Sims. Um, they do have a couple of guys that I do wonder, like, what they're going to do. Like, say, Evan Fournier, right? Because he was a guy that they signed a few seasons ago, and, he just hasn't really panned out, and his role has kind of diminished for them.
Yeah.
So you kind of wonder if he's a guy that maybe down the line they look to move. Just for anybody, right? Obviously, Rose is gone. He was kind of a veteran, but his playing time kind of went down as he spent more time in New York, just because it seems like he's kind of declined a little bit, um, just to the point where he's not necessarily an every night player now. I don't think, but regardless, I mean, I don't feel like they did like a ton, but I do like the DiVincenzo pickup. One concern I do have is I do wonder if they may have overperformed last year.
Okay.
And I just wonder, like, are they going to be, worse maybe next year? I'm
Sure.
not saying that they are going to be, but it is something to kind of think about, right? Because, 2 seasons ago, or I guess now 3 seasons ago, right, they made the playoffs, had a really good regular season, lost to the Hawks in the first round, and then missed the playoffs the next year. Obviously, now that you have Brunson, your team will be better than they were 2 seasons ago for sure. I just wonder if there may be a little bit of regression, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I do like the DiVincenzo pickup, but I think he will help. I
Mhm.
just feel like, if you want to go further, right, you probably need to make some more tweaks to the roster.
Well, for me, I think, their entire postseason, I feel like, is kind of going to be contingent on Cleveland again. I think, I feel like if Cleveland comes out of the gate and then, say they're a higher seed, or say they're even like the third seed or something like that, and then, the Knicks have to go up against them, I think Cleveland will be stronger than what they were last season, and I think they'll be better prepared. So, if Cleveland is better, then I think New York will probably, like, like you said, we'll probably see a little bit of regression. But I don't know. In general, I don't really feel like they did too much to make me feel like they're like over the hump, but it wasn't like an average offseason. I think it was a fairly above average one, actually, considering that they didn't really lose too much. So, but in
I
general, I do agree. Like, we could be seeing some regression, but I think it's really contingent on how Cleveland does this season.
Yeah. But it kind of goes back to also, when I looked at the way their season ended last year, I don't think, if you're a Knicks fan, you should be, too disappointed. I mean, obviously
Mm-mm.
it sucks to lose to a lower seed, but I don't think anybody expected the Knicks to really get out of the first round.
No.
But now it's kind of unfortunate because now that means that I think a lot of people will be expecting the Knicks to get a little bit better. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, much better than what they did last year. And that's a conference finals appearance. And, I think that's going to be really tough to do because that means you're going to be one of the best two teams in the East standing. And I don't
Right.
necessarily know if they're going to do that because they're going to have to beat some teams that, I don't know if they have a great chance of beating, because
Right. I
if
agree.
it's like, even if they have like a first round opponent that they can beat, right? Like, maybe they go against, one of those lower seeded teams, like if they're the 4 or 5 seed, right? And they beat, whomever they play, then it's like you might have to play like Boston in the second round, or you might have to play, Milwaukee in the second round. And if you don't play one, you'll play the other, right?
Right.
Or something like that. Maybe you'll play Miami, say if Miami gets Lillard, right, then that makes them even tougher. So,
Because they
I
finished
mean,
as a fifth. Excuse me. New York finished as a fifth seed, um,
right.
last season. So I'm thinking they're probably going to be around the same mark as well.
Yeah,
I
because
don't think
that's
they're
the
going to drop, but I don't think they're going to climb up to four either.
Right, yeah, because that's how I look at their offseason. Because again, the DiVincenzo signing is good. It's just like, does it make the Knicks significantly better?
Right.
Probably not, at least for right now, right?
Right.
Of course, if they make some type of trade, during the season or something like that, that can kind of shake things up. But, as of right now, I don't know if they're going to be much better than they were last year.
Right.
Um, but again, if you're 1% better, I guess that's better than being 0% better. But,
And you're not
um,
wrong.
yeah, but at the same time, that may not be good enough this time around because again, like you may not get the same, opponent in the first round. It might be a tougher opponent. So,
Sure.
just because of just, the playoff seedings and whatnot.
Sure.
So we'll see where it goes, but I do think it was fine because again, with a lot of these teams, there's not a whole lot you can necessarily do if you already have like, a number of guys that are making, decent money. Like you have Randall, Brunson, and RJ Barrett, I think now is on his big contract, right? You have some other guys that are like sort of in that mid tier, like Fournier, Mitchell Robinson, Josh Hart.
Yeah.
So like once you get to there, right, like you're just not going to be able to really give out big contracts like that. So now I think it kind of comes down to seeing what you have and then going from there and then tweaking it. Like I said, the
Yeah.
Fournier contract I think is the one that I would look at because I feel like of the guys with big contracts, he's probably like one of the least necessary players for them. Because again,
I agree.
he's not really been playing or part of the rotation.
And when he
And now
does play, it's not very stellar.
yeah, like now they have guys that I think you'd rather give more minutes to. Like I think you'd rather give more minutes to DiVincenzo than Fournier, right? Because DiVincenzo can still shoot, but he's also a much better, defender, rebounder.
Same
I
with
think
Josh Hart.
yeah, same with
Emmanuel
Josh
quickly.
Hart. Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing.
Even Grimes.
Right. So, and again, like I guess then the other question is, are there any other guys on the roster that maybe you might expect, to get better, right? RJ Barrett, of course, could get better, maybe. Outside of that, I mean,
Hmm.
quickly maybe, but he's kind of morphed into sort of like a sixth man role for them.
Right.
Grimes is probably, where he is, right? In terms of like he's probably going to be relatively similar.
Hmm.
Um, Mitchell Robinson, does he, get a little bit better like offensively? I feel like, he kind of is what he is at this point. I could be wrong,
He's
but
just an athletic rebounding guy.
yeah, like, when he came into the league, I think people had like a really high, level of like expectations in terms of what he could be.
Sure.
And I think he's fine, right? But I mean, at the same time, like I'm not gonna pick on somebody who was like a second round pick or whatever. But I feel like he's fine. Like he's a decent option, for what New York needs. But
Right.
again, I don't know if there's too many guys on the Knicks roster where I expect them to be like significantly better, other than like RJ Barrett. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if I'm expecting him to be significantly better.
You're hoping.
But it's just, yeah, you're just, it's the first year of his new big contract, so
Right.
you're kind of hoping that he's going to take another step forward.
Sure.
And he was what, the third pick of the draft.
Yeah.
Uh,
And he
you know,
hasn't necessarily lived up to expectations
right?
sometimes, at times. You
Yeah,
know.
and like in fairness to him, like when he first came into the league, like the Knicks were a mess.
Yeah.
Compared to the other two teams, right? Like Memphis had kind of established some stuff. New Orleans had just kind of like rebuilt their team after
Right.
moving AD. So like they had some foundations, right? But like New York really had like nothing.
Yeah.
You know what
It
I
was
mean?
really
So,
bad.
yeah, exactly. So like now, he's kind of in a more structured environment. So and it seems like he has gotten better in some ways, right? But again, like 3-point shooting, I think is the main thing that's got to improve because I think that really is what determines his ceiling as a player because he does other stuff relatively well, right? Like he's decent
Get to the
defensively.
rack.
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's he can get to the rim pretty well.
His ball
He can,
handling's improved too.
yeah, the
It
ball
used to
handling,
be like it was so high and it would dribble like almost above his
right?
head, and he's what, almost 6'7",
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
taller.
Right. It's just the 3-point shooting. I think that's the main thing that's got to improve because it's just you already have Randall who's kind of hit or miss from three, right? Robinson you're not worried about at all from three. And then after that it's Brunson who's fine, and then Grimes who's fine. If we're talking about the starting group, DiVincenzo's fine. Hart can kind of be up and down, but I think he has a reputation as a decent 3-point shooter. But with Barrett, right, like it would really help, I think, if he could
He was
improve that too.
consistent,
Yeah, if he was more consistent, because
and
that's the main
he
thing.
looked okay in the World Cup.
Right, yeah, for Canada. So
Hmm.
that's the main thing. Like the consistency, I think, is kind of what you're looking for there. That's where I think like the Knicks could be better with the roster they have if RJ Barrett takes another step forward. Like if he kind of
Sure.
gets like to all-star level or somewhere around that,
Right.
right? That's where I think like, okay, you got, you might have something here.
Because
Um,
that would be deadly alongside Jalen Brunson
right,
and
yeah, and then it
Julius Randle. Oh my goodness.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, if the better RJ Barrett becomes, maybe that makes Randall a little bit more expendable, and then maybe you decide to kind of do something with that. I'm
Yeah.
not saying he has to go, but like, like, just
Are
you just
are we
never know.
feeding? Are we feeding into the Randall hate? Because I know New York fans hate that guy right now.
I mean, I don't think he's bad. I think the main issue with him is that it seems like it just seems like his game takes a dip in the playoffs. And like I said, I want to give him at least the benefit of the doubt of the injury
Right. I
last
agree.
year. And it's like, his first time in the playoffs, like he was their best player, their only go-to guy in terms of offense. So now he doesn't have to be like the primary guy,
Right.
but still it just feels like, is he, it feels like there's probably going to be regression from him
I
from the
feel you.
regular season to the playoffs. And
I agree.
kind of hard to go deep into the playoffs when like one of your best players does that. I mean, you do have Brunson, who seems fine. But still, I think you probably need to do better if you want to take the next step. But for now, I think like they're in an okay spot. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like I
That
don't think
I'm not super high on them, but I'm not low on them at all, you know?
yeah, like I
I
don't
like
think
them.
yeah, like they definitely didn't get worse.
Right.
Um, but I don't think they got better enough to make me feel like they're gonna be much better than last year.
Yeah.
So
They
I
made
guess like
improvements, but they still might regress, pretty much like you said earlier.
yeah, so like in terms of a grade, what do you think you'd give the Knicks for, their off season?
Mm. It's a tough one. Earlier I said, that I didn't think they had an average offseason, so I'm probably going to give them a B.
Okay.
I kind of liked some of the things that they did. They let's see, let's just walk through it real quick. So they signed DiVincenzo. That's a plus, I think. Then they
Yep.
traded for Obi Toppin, which is another great move. I think they
Way up be topping.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Traded away Obi Toppin, for draft considerations. So that's pretty good as well. And then, they signed a couple of guys to some two-way contracts, then re-signed Josh Hart. So overall, I think it's good. You retain some core guys, and then also you were able to get Dante DiVincenzo, who's a guy who has playoff experience, championship experience as well. So I can't be too mad at it. I'll give it a B.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I'm kind of with you, like B, maybe B minus ish. Because again, like the DiVincenzo signing is fine. Bringing back Josh Hart, right? That was pretty necessary, and that's good. But it's like, not much else necessarily to write home about. But I think like it was a fine offseason, like you
Sure.
said, in that B range, just because again, I do think they at least improved, right? So like
Yeah.
like I wouldn't like I wouldn't give a C to somebody that I didn't think improved. Like a
Right.
C to me is like you either stayed the same or you might have gotten slightly worse.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like because
Yes.
the DiVincenzo signing is good. Like it shouldn't necessarily be the only real thing, but again, there wasn't a whole lot they could do in terms of signing guys, and I think that's a good one.
And then
To sign.
re-signing Hart too.
Yeah, exactly. And re-signing Hart
And
because
then
now
getting
that
rid of Obi Toppin because it seemed like he wasn't really working for New York anyways.
yeah, so now that gives you the flexibility, maybe to move Fournier because now it's like, oh, before you might be like, oh, if we move Fournier, we might lose some depth at the guard spot, but it's like, no, now you're good because now you got Brunson, Grimes, DiVincenzo, Hart, like you're pretty set at that guard spot. Like
Right.
you have a lot of guys that can play different positions, right? Sometimes they'll play Josh Hart as like a 3-4.
Right.
So, I think they're pretty set. I think when you look at the over-unders, right, I see like 46 and a half, 44 and a half. So that basically means that they're either going to be about the same or they think a little bit worse.
Yeah.
Because again, they won 47 games. So
And that's what we
46
thought.
and a half, 44 and a half. That's pretty much, like I said, what we thought.
Yeah.
Just because, again, like, DiVincenzo's an upgrade, but it's not enough to make them, like, significantly better. You know what I
It'll
mean?
probably only win them one or half a game, or you know how statistics are.
Yeah, you never know because again, there could be games where it's like, oh shoot, we would have lost this game if it hadn't have been for like this late game play that he made. Maybe he
Sure.
got an off
And that's
rebound.
my point.
Right. Yeah, but again, is it enough to like change the course of your season? Nah, probably not.
No.
So, but again, like I said, I do like it. But again, like it is at the very least, nice to see if you're a Knicks fan, right? You got to be, relatively pleased with how the team is now, because again, they were kind of one of those joke laughing stock teams, I think, for a while, and considering that they are kind of looked at as like a very historic,
Yes.
franchise,
One of the
you
most
know,
iconic.
right, exactly. And now, they're in a spot where like now Knicks fans can feel good about their team, right? You see them cheering on, their guys at the games, and again, they're into it, right?
Yeah.
Like when they
They're
were ripping
passionate.
the yeah, like like when they were ripping the Julius Randle posters, after they lost, like, it's like, hey, they care. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
And it's like
they weren't
sometimes you want to see passion from both sides, whether it be the good or the ugly, because that means it's working. That means people care legitimately. So you
yeah,
kind of love
because
to
like
see that sometimes.
yeah, because I remember like as a Laker fan a couple seasons ago, like when they had that, stretch where like it looked pretty clear like that they were gonna be horrible,
Mm,
right? Like eventually people just stopped caring, right? Like
right.
there was like a stretch where at one point they were like booing the team, of course, because that's
Sure.
what we do. When teams don't play well, or at least some fan bases do.
Yeah.
But like, then it just got to a point where like people just stopped caring, right? Like
Right.
people weren't going to the games, they didn't care. Like they were just like, wake me up when we have a good team again. Like,
Yeah.
and like
And that's like
now,
some fair weather fan stuff. Like New York, they care, bro.
yeah.
Passion's there.
Right. So, now I guess, we're going to move on to the Brooklyn Nets, right? So that's the other team in New York, I guess. So they had, kind of a doozy of a year last year, right? So, obviously, they had the stretch with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, right, where it
Hmm.
looked like they were going to be really good. They ended up not getting as far as they would have wanted to. Right. Then the following year, right, then they, have a lot of, drama going on, right, with what was going on with Kyrie and then Harden eventually asked for a trade, got traded to Philly. So then it was Durant and Kyrie, right? They got ousted by Boston. And then after that, right, then they had again an offseason where Durant asked for a trade. Um, of course, we had all those rumors in terms of Kyrie getting tied to other teams like LA, right? Durant was tied to other teams like Phoenix, potentially Golden State. And we were kind of waiting for something to happen, kind of like what we've been doing with Harden and Lillard right now, but nothing really happened. And then, they went into the season with those guys on the roster. They started off really poorly, right? Steve Nash got fired, and he was replaced with Jock Bond, who was the assistant. He did well. They kind of righted the ship. Then people were feeling better about the team. And then, all of a sudden, randomly, right, when it seemed like things were going all right, and guys were going to get extensions like Kyrie, then all of a sudden he asked for a trade. Everybody was shocked at what was going on. And then he got traded, but he did not get traded to LA. He was actually traded to Dallas, right? For Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian
Yeah.
yeah, and then Durant was traded to Phoenix for, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and a boatload of picks. So,
Yeah.
Brooklyn kind of officially started a new era. And, they still made the playoffs, so they did some stuff. And then they went into the first round against Philly, got annihilated, got swept. I mean, the games were close, in fairness, right? So it
Yeah.
wasn't like it was an absolute beating,
But that
right? But
record they had though was built off of the backs of like,
yeah,
the
right.
superstars and the
That's
team before.
right. And that's kind of the thing I think when we look at Brooklyn, where,
They're gonna
I'm
be
not
horrible, bro.
yeah, I'm not as high on this roster in terms of how good they're going to be next year. You look at it, right? You got Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, who was great for Brooklyn.
Yeah.
When
Shout out
he was there,
McCall.
right? Yeah, he's definitely established himself as like an all-star tier kind of guy, right?
Absolutely.
Go-to guy late in games. Still have Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Those guys are good. Those guys are fine. They just re-signed Cameron Johnson, I believe, to a
Yep.
new $100+ million
Hmm.
contract. And you also have Nick Claxton, right, who is their center, who I think they'll eventually have to pay as well, right? He
Yep.
was a guy who stepped up last year,
Big time.
defensively. Especially when Durant and Kyrie were there, it felt like he kind of took a little bit of a step back. But again, that's because he's not really much of an offensive guy. He's
Yeah.
kind of playing off the other guys, and
Yep.
when those guys aren't there, he's gonna look worse, at least offensively. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So,
I agree.
um,
I saw them play live and I definitely agree with that.
right, yeah, they did sign some guys. They grabbed Dennis Smith Jr. from Charlotte, right? So I mean, he was
Dude,
that.
this is a bad offseason grade for
I
me.
mean,
Sorry, I have to spoil it.
in fairness to him, he actually played well for Charlotte,
Yes.
especially
Yes.
defensively. I don't think he lived up to the potential that I think people saw in him when he was drafted, but he's kind of tried to find a niche as like, a decent athlete. He's playing hard defensively.
Sure.
Um, they signed Lonnie Walker from the Lakers, right? Obviously he was a guy, that I guess will give them some playoff experience. Um, you know, they still have Cam Thomas, who is a big time scorer. At times for them during the season, didn't play as much in the playoffs, but that's because he's primarily a scorer, doesn't really do much else.
Right.
Um, they did draft Derek Whitehead, and Noah Clowney. So
Yeah.
I
And we
think,
like their draft though. We like
yeah,
that
I
draft.
think we liked the guys that they picked. Whitehead was a guy where I think his issue had been the injuries in
Yep.
college.
Injury
Um,
history hurt him because he would have been probably a top 5 pick.
right, and he was a guy where I think both of us thought that he might get drafted, by one of those other teams, right? Like maybe like one of those like quasi, contenders or better, where
Right.
like they might take a flyer on him and be like, hey, this guy was talented, let's see if we can bring him in. But the Nets took him. And then Clowney, I think, is kind of like a tall, but kind of raw big, but maybe, he's got some length. So, I'm sure he can probably contribute at least on the defensive end.
Yeah.
Um, Grabbed a couple other guys, Trendon Watford from Portland, right? I like that fine. He was just a guy, that kind of played for Portland last year, especially, when their season was kind of in the toilet. Darius Baisley, right? They grabbed him from Phoenix, right? Didn't really do much there. Oklahoma City dumped him, and
Yeah.
basically gave him to Phoenix. And, they're a young team, right? That, is kind of, in need sort of talent. So that doesn't exactly make me feel great about that. But again, maybe he'll find some second chances in Brooklyn.
Who
Still
knows?
have Ron Sharp, still have Royce O'Neal. And also, We hadn't mentioned yet, they still have the guy, the former number one pick, Ben Simmons.
Yeah,
So,
that's the
you know,
story.
yeah, so, and it's kind of been a weird situation for him, right? Because he was in Philly, he was really good, obviously, wasn't all star, all NBA defensive type of guy, and then just he hasn't been able to stay on the court, hasn't played really much at all, had a lot of back issues, and I don't really know what to make of him at this point, because I do remember like it was rough for him early last season, and then he had like a couple of like a stretch of like a few games where he actually started to kind of look like himself,
Yeah, you're not
and
wrong.
all of a sudden he just reverted back to
It was the
whatever that.
weirdest thing ever.
Yeah, so I don't really know what to make of that. Um, and, like, in a way, like, it kind of, like, almost, like, gives you, like, 2 different versions of, like, what this team could be. Because if you actually had, like, a good version of Ben Simmons, right, then, this team ceiling-wise would be much better, right? They're not
They
gonna
would
be.
all be better. I think
Yeah, but
everybody around him would be playing a lot better. And not
right.
to mention, I'm pretty sure right now he's the highest paid player on that squad.
Yeah, so, like, that's the main thing where it's like, that's kind of where, like, I don't feel great about the team because again, like you mentioned, you look at, what they were once Durant and Kyrie were removed, they were below 500. I mean, like, they were, so it wasn't like they were lighting the world on fire, it was mainly that the original version of that team won them enough games to kind of cover for them,
Exactly. And that's what
so it's
people
like
aren't talking about.
yeah, there was no way that they could just fall out of the playoffs, unless they just went on like a 20 game losing streak, which
Right.
just it wasn't going to happen.
We saw
So,
them fall in the standings, but not out of the playoffs and, out of,
right.
I guess, contention, I guess, if you
So,
want to say
yeah,
that.
so that's the issue. So like, I do like the draft picks,
Me too.
I like the I like bringing back Cam Johnson, re-signing him, that's fine. They did move Joe Harris to Detroit, dumped him for
Good
basically
move.
like draft compensation, that's fine because you don't really need him
Yeah.
at this point since you're
Not
not,
in a rebuild, honestly.
yeah,
This is more like a subtle, well, I shouldn't say subtle, major rebuild because they got rid of
yeah.
their stars, all three of
Right,
them.
and again, they're in a weird spot because kind of like Houston, they kind of have to compete where it's like they don't really have picks like that, because they gave some of those up to get Harden.
Sure.
So I mean, they have to compete. So like they can't tank and be horrible, but I also don't really think that they're going to be that great because again, I do like some of the players on the roster, but I just think collectively, I'm not really sure that they're going to be that great. Just because again, like I have to keep pointing this out, right? Once those guys were moved, they were below 500, so
Exactly.
like, because again, they were pretty good, record wise before those guys were moved.
I
Like, at
remember.
they were close to the top of the Eastern Conference.
Yes.
Um, so I mean, like, you know, the floor for them was, pretty good in terms of like, there was no way they were going to fall out, like you mentioned. Like, maybe the worst could have been like a play in spot, but even
Sure.
then, like, I still think they
They
were
were so
six.
far ahead, though.
Right. So
Um,
that's the issue.
what do you, okay, before we get into like grades and move on for a second, do we believe in Ben Simmons? I think I do at this point. I think I'm ready to give him one last chance, one last shot. I know everybody's seen the footage, the offseason stuff, the pictures, all of his comments as well, saying he's back, he's better than he ever was before. But do you think his play will reflect that? Are you on the Ben Simmons hype train? I think I am at this point. I'm willing to give him one last chance, but I know you're a little bit more hesitant than me sometimes to jump the gun. So I want to hear your response.
Hesitant because it's like, the old classic saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me
Sure,
twice, shame on me.
sure.
But like at the same time, like, just when you look at his age, it just seems like it'd be really hard to believe that he just all of a sudden just like has completely fallen off and just can't, play basketball anymore. I mean, he's still 27, right? Like
Right.
theory, he should be entering the prime of his career, right? But it just seems like it's on the downward trend. Like you said, I'm I guess willing to give him one last chance, just because it's like, how much worse could it really be? Because like it's been pretty bad, right?
It's
Like
been
2 seasons
horrible.
ago, he didn't play at all. And then last year he played, but he wasn't good. It
Right.
got to the point where it seemed like his coach, was kind of like,
They pulled him,
subliminally taking shots at him.
and they pulled him pretty much. They
Yeah,
pulled
and
the
they
plug on
pulled him.
it. But
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think the interesting thing is they didn't move him, in this off season. So that tells me that they're willing to give him one last chance like me.
Right. And so, and again, like the issue is his value is probably at an all-time low right now anyway. So, there's really if you move him now, like you're not going to get, I don't think, anything for him except
No.
maybe salary dump at the very least. You know, if he does play well, and can kind of like, be a reclamation project where he kind of looks, at least somewhat like his old self, then if you're Brooklyn, right, then you have the opportunity to be like, all right, we can move him, for more draft stuff, and then, excuse me, we'll be okay. But
Sure.
just I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to feel about it because that's
I
the
know.
main thing.
It's
Just
tough.
like, yeah, because I hear the quotes. I hear from some guys who cover the league, who are like, yeah, he looks really good, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm willing to at least give him one more shot. I think he's got 1 year after this season left on his deal, so he's
Yep.
got this season at 37.8 million, and then
It's a
next season
lot,
at
bro.
40.3 million. That's a lot, and after that, who the heck knows? Because I mean,
Right.
like he could be out of the league,
Yeah, you're
by
not
that
wrong.
yeah, so he's got literally, I think, one more shot because if he doesn't figure it out this season, I don't know if he's going to figure that out. But
Yeah, he has to play pretty good, in my opinion. I don't think he can play mediocre. He definitely can't play bad, and he definitely
right,
can't like not play at all. So he's got to play good. If he doesn't play
right,
good,
yeah,
it's done.
yeah, that's the thing. I feel like I'm more hesitant, to
I
just because
understand.
it just feels like we have a history, a pattern where it just seems like, I don't know. Like I said, I'm willing to at least give him the benefit of the doubt because of
Sure.
the back injuries.
Right. And I feel
So
like he has a
maybe
mental block somewhere in
yeah.
there too.
So maybe he's finally healthy. We'll see. But again, it would be helpful because again, if he actually can kind of show what that he's at least somewhat close to what he used to be, that makes Brooklyn a lot better. Because again, if he's
For sure.
you know, I mean, I'm not expecting him to be all NBA, but if he's like good, right? Just good.
For sure.
Like that makes Brooklyn a lot better than what they could be. Because as of right now, if he's basically just dead weight on the roster, right? Like basically a $37 million paperweight. I mean,
That's rough.
they're gonna be really bad. I
And
mean, like they're
he's holding them down if he plays bad.
yeah, but if he actually, like I said, if he can kind of have somewhat of a bounce back year, because again, like I mean, the expectation is pretty low. So like even if he averaged like 10, 7, and 7, right? Like that would be an improvement over what we've seen, the last couple of seasons. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
You're not wrong.
I'm not trying to predict his stats or anything. It's just I don't know. I don't feel great about it, but like I said, I'm willing to at least see what it looks like, because
Sure.
it's like he had back problems. He had some weird stuff going on.
Yep.
Maybe he's figured it out, but like at the same time, I don't know. Like right now, if it's like a tug of war between do I believe it or do I not believe it? Like I'm on the not buying it
Yeah.
side right
You're on the
now.
history repeats itself side. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. But again, he's still young and he should be entering the prime of his career. So there's no real reason why he just all of a sudden can't play basketball anymore. But we'll
Right.
see.
Yeah. Could
It
have a
will definitely
comeback.
be it will definitely be something to look at because again,
Yes.
like I said, the better he plays, you know, the better Brooklyn will be, and then the better he'll look because then he'll be out there playing well,
Absolutely.
adding some value, and then somebody might be interested in grabbing him, like in at the end, either maybe at the deadline or next offseason. So, but in terms of the rest of the team, yeah, I'm not really feeling too great about this squad. So in terms of, I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but in terms of a grade, what do you think you would give Brooklyn, for their offseason?
Probably a D. Um,
Okay.
I don't want to give him an F. I don't think it was that bad. It could have been worse, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
But, looking at what they did, signed Jalen Wilson to a two-way contract, not really, that impactful, like you said. Then I think Patty Mills or whatever. So it's like, I don't
I don't
know.
even think he's on the team. I think he was
Yeah.
moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like they moved him in like draft considerations,
Yeah.
whatever. They got weird picks, and then that's probably going to fizzle out into nothing. Then Dennis Smith Jr., okay, that's cool, I guess. Darius Baisley, I'm not too high on it. I know we talked about it, but
Yeah.
okay, I guess.
Right.
And then Armani Brooks to a two-way con. Like it's just not enough. Nothing really to change the
Right.
record, I think. And like you said, this is already a team that was built on the backs of the superstars. Like that's why they got to the playoffs last year in the first place. Because if you take away those superstars, like you said, they were below 500. So I doubt they would have made any splashes. So D for me.
Yeah. I definitely would probably say that like
Yeah,
D plus, D
yeah,
minus. Just I like the draft picks, but
me too.
and obviously re-signing Cam Johnson, that's fine. But
Yes,
you know, nothing really else. I mean, moving Joe Harris, that's fine. Um, but at the same time, like I guess it's kind of hard because it's like at the same time it's kind of hard to gauge because it's like my expectation for Brooklyn isn't that high. So it's like I like some of the things that they did, like I said, in terms of the draft and, a couple of the
Sure.
trades, and bringing back Cam Johnson, right? But there's not really anything else they did where I'm like, this was stellar, like
Yeah.
absolutely well done, you
Nothing
know,
eye popping.
right. I guess like, in addition to Ben Simmons, Mikal Bridges, like I mentioned, does he get better?
I
Is
think he
he a guy
does.
that takes another step? Because again, I think we mentioned, we saw him in the Olympics, played pretty well.
Hmm.
Obviously, when he played for Brooklyn, he was great,
Hmm.
down the stretch, because again, his play was one of the biggest reasons why they, even though they were below 500, it could have been a lot worse, right? If Mikal Bridges, was closer to being kind of like just like a, like a 3-and-D wing like he
Sure.
was in Phoenix, right? But now he's shown a lot more skill, off the bounce, right? Finishing around the basket, shooting off the dribble, things that he just wasn't really able to do a whole lot of in Phoenix, just
Yep.
because of his role.
It's all about
Um,
the system.
right. So now, again, does he take another step forward? Because he's, a guy that's relatively young. I know he's not 23 or anything, right? But he should still, in theory, be a guy, that should probably get better, at the very least. So I mean, um, again, what do you expect from him? Do you expect like a potential All-Star season? Maybe not, because again, just in terms of the competition in the East, but you expect him to probably keep this level of play up, if not get better,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
agree. I think he's gonna probably get better along with Cam Johnson. I think both of them are gonna play at an elite level this year. Hopefully Ben Simmons does the same thing as well. Then we can talk about them being, a little bit better than where, a lot of people are gonna predict them to be. But I think McCall Bridges is gonna play great and Cam Johnson as well. And I think Claxton might even play a little bit better as well.
Yeah. Um, speaking of the Nets, also as we're talking about them again, over-unders have them at 36.5 and 37.5. So
Oof,
that's pretty low.
that's
Um,
horrible.
you know, yeah, exactly. And again, that's kind of what we're thinking, right? Because like I
Exactly.
don't think either of us really expect them to do a whole lot. They were 43, or excuse me, no, not 43.
45 and 37.
Yeah, or yeah, exactly. 45 and 37. So I mean that's significantly worse, right? That's basically 8 games worse, right? So if you finish 8 games worse and you were already six, you're probably going to be,
It's probably going to
in
be inverted records. They're probably going to finish 37 and 45.
yeah, and that's probably going to put you either in the play-in or like, maybe
11th.
yeah, 11th or something like that. Because again, like we know in the East, right? Obviously, you got Boston, Milwaukee, Miami, Philly, right? That's already four, right? Cleveland 5. I'm not saying in terms of where they're seated, but
I
just in
get you.
terms of how good those teams are going to be, right? New York, 6, right? Those are probably your six,
Hmm.
best teams, and then once you get to the past six, right? That's when you get into the play-in, right? So I mean, that's when you get to like Atlanta, or somewhere along those lines, right? Or again like a
I feel like
Brooklyn or
I feel like the play-in is wide open in the East though. It's kind of interesting
yeah,
because
yeah,
I for some reason I feel like Toronto may miss that thing. I feel like Chicago could miss it too. Like you said,
right,
Miami's going to be a little bit higher. I think Atlanta's a lock for the play as well.
right. So yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's again once you start getting that 6, 7, 8 spot, right? Then you only got a couple more spots, to
Yeah,
be before you're out of the plan. And again, Brooklyn would be competing, like I said, with Chicago, Toronto, those teams, because I think they're gonna. Well, I don't know. Chicago probably is gonna at least try to be a playing team just because of who they have on the team, right? Like I
right.
don't think they're gonna tank with DeRozan
No, no,
and
no, no. They
Embiid on
may
the
just suck though. You never know.
yeah, they're probably yeah, because we talked about them in the previous
And
episode because
I think they're going to be horrible.
yeah, we think they're gonna be bad. So I mean,
Worst constructed roster I think we've talked about outside of maybe this Brooklyn one. I don't
yeah,
know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I like the wings kind of for Brooklyn, but
Me
again, like
too.
the guards, not really
I
too
don't like the
high on
depth
that.
though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and, like
Way
guards,
too thin.
yeah, like it's basically what Dinwiddie, Dennis Smith Jr. and I guess Ben Simmons used to play guard. I don't know if he'll be a guard on this team, right? But and then after that, Cam Thomas, Lonnie Walker. I mean, that's not great. So I mean,
No, it's horrible.
you got, but again, if you're gonna have you know, a lot of depth at another spot, which is the wings, right? Then there's gonna be another area where you're gonna be lacking.
It's to
Even
be
at the center
expected.
spot, yeah, at the center spot, other than Claxton, I mean, not
There's
much
nothing
else. I mean,
there. And that's kind of
yeah,
how it was when Durant and Kyrie were there. And that was one of the
yeah,
drawbacks of that squad. People are like, they don't have enough depth. You can't just ask these guys to carry them the whole time. Look at Denver.
yeah, yeah, because Brooklyn played really small. Even in the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
at times it was like what Royce O'Neal, playing center, or
Yeah, it's not a winning
somebody,
formula, bro.
right? Yeah. So I mean,
Clearly.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, Royce O'Neal trying to stick with Joel Embiid. I mean, he
Good luck, bro.
tried, but I mean, that's not the easiest thing in the world to
No,
do. So I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. Again, like they're going to be significantly worse, and
I agree.
I feel like there are people who know that for sure, and clearly Vegas knows that. Just because again, like they're projecting them to be basically 8 games worse. But I do think I don't know because I feel like there probably are some people who may be like, hey, they finished, whatever it was that we said that they finished, with those guys on the roster, and it's like a lot of that was because of the previous guys, so that's not going to carry over.
Right.
I have a hard time buying that they're definitely not going to be better. They're going to be worse. It's
Right.
just a matter of how much worse are they going to be? Are they going to be, like 7, 8 worse, right? Which is like a spot or two worse, or are they going to be like 9, 10 worse? And, like you mentioned, the play-in is wide open in the Eastern Conference because there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be in the same exact spot. And, if you go on like a 3-game losing streak, right, I feel like you could drop from like 7 to 9 or like,
Easily.
8 to 10 or 8 to 11 or something. Because I feel like that play-in area, there's a lot of teams, and I think there's some teams that could maybe sneak in there. Like, what if Indiana, because we like a lot of what they did. What if they sneak in there?
That's what I was
Um,
thinking.
or
Indiana,
somebody,
Orlando. It could be
right? Yeah,
anybody.
yeah. Because I feel like I like Indiana's roster overall better than Brooklyn's.
Me
I mean, I
too.
don't know. I don't know if they're gonna win more games, but I feel like they have more collective talent. So I mean,
More potential.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't feel great about this Brooklyn team, but that's what they decided to do once they, moved Durant and Kyrie. I know their thought process was like, we don't, we want to remain competitive, and I'm like, you're not going to be competitive by moving those two guys. Otherwise, you just keep those two guys. Like, I understand, like, you're
Yeah.
not just gonna flat out come out and say that you're going to tank, but we know what's going on here. Like,
Yeah. They're
everybody
just
knows.
gonna suck. They're gonna suck, and then they'll get draft picks later on.
Yeah,
It's just
later.
simple
Yeah,
as that.
exactly. I
It's not
like.
gonna be in the next 2 years though.
Right,
Maybe
because
3.
again, like the Nets, their draft situation, right? We know is different because when they did the Harden deal, right? Like they kind of sacrificed, some of those picks, and it's like, yeah, you could use some of those picks right now,
Yeah, it's like a
because
toddler was running the my league. It's
yeah.
ridiculous.
In fairness, they got Phoenix's picks, so that's something that will help them out, in the future.
Hmm.
But like for example, it doesn't look like they have a pick of their own until 2026. That's a
That's a
while.
long. That's a long time. It may not sound like
Yeah,
it,
by
but it
that
is.
by that point, it's gonna be like our 3rd year anniversary doing this podcast or
Exactly.
something like that.
Can't
So I
wait to
mean, yeah,
look back on that one. Holy
yeah. So not great, Jim. I mean, that's
no,
all I'm gonna say in
it's
terms of
horrible.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we talked about Chicago and it was pretty nasty. I
This
feel
is
like
just
this
as
is not
bad.
nasty. Yeah, I mean, I feel like at the very least because of Bridges, like you feel a little bit like
Pumped up.
more hyper excited. I feel like it'd be pretty hard to be excited about Chicago, but I mean,
I agree.
are that many people going to be excited about Brooklyn? I don't know.
No,
I mean,
I mean
yeah,
unless they come out and shock the world. If they come out the gate like shooting lights out, like you said, Bridges seems like he clearly took a step forward. Then I feel like people would be like, "Oh man, Brooklyn has a chance," and then they'll probably fizzle out around the All Star break. But hey,
yeah. So, what do you think is more likely?
what's up?
Do you think Brooklyn will get in as an 8th seed, or do you think they're more likely to just miss the playoff?
I think they're probably gonna. I don't know. I feel like 8 seed is a little high for me. If they're
Right.
sitting at 37 games, estimated,
Yeah.
then I would probably say that's around 10th seed,
Yeah. I just
bottom.
meant it from the perspective of like they're in the play-in and then they get out of the play-in and
Okay,
then they're 8th seed
I could see
versus
them
like
getting out of the play-in. Yeah, I could
yeah,
see them getting out of there. I think they have the potential, some star power, decent
right.
coaching.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like it's possible. I wouldn't
What do
rule
you
it out
what do you think is more likely?
that they get
Do you think
bounced or if they
Yeah. Do you
advance.
think it's more likely that they get out of the play-in or that they get bounced out of the play-in if they're in it?
I think they'll get out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. If we're
Yeah.
talking playing, I think they'll get out of it.
Yeah. They have a chance. Because I feel like I'd feel better about them over like Chicago in the play-in.
Right,
Um,
exactly. If it comes
you
down
know,
to that, like if it's
yeah.
Chicago and Brooklyn, I think I'm picking Brooklyn 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, if it's like Indiana, Brooklyn,
Yeah.
I don't know about that one, but
I think Indiana gets the edge. I feel like they
y-
just have they're a little bit more loaded, a
yeah,
little
and they
deeper
got
too.
more, yeah, and I think now they've added more size that I think
Yeah.
would make it a little
Jerace
bit tougher.
Walker's gonna tear up the league.
So, I mean, yeah. Yeah, like I said, not great in terms of the net situation, but in fairness, I think it will get better down the line because they have those Phoenix picks. So I think there will be light at the end of the tunnel, but I think for now it's going to be a little bit
It's
painful.
just
But
3 years away.
yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I do wonder how the fan base feels because it's like, now you're not really stressing over like, what's going on. But at the same time, I feel like you gotta feel disappointed because they were close. When that first year that they had those three
Yeah,
guys together,
man.
like they had a legitimate shot, of going to the finals and winning it all, and then like it just completely just fell apart from there.
A matter of a freaking toe length, bro. It's
Yeah, I mean,
ridiculous.
basically,
As a
yeah,
Durant fan, that haunts me still to this day.
yeah, I mean, pretty much going from like potential champs to like now kind of like NBA chumps in a way, where
Pretty
it's like,
much.
well,
Like they
I mean,
suck now. I mean, we clear. I mean, like if we're being honest, like if we're just being blunt, they pretty much suck on paper.
is that a hot take?
I don't think so. I don't think, like you said, I don't think anybody's really high on this team, and I don't think the fan base has crazy expectations where they're like, we're a lock for the playoffs. No,
Yeah,
it's you have a chance, not a
yeah,
lock.
yeah. In the East, I guess you have a better chance because you're in the
Absolutely,
East. But like I don't
doesn't
know.
mean much though. The
Yeah,
Western Conference, it's weak, bro.
yeah, yeah. So now we're going into the news rumors of the day. Again, let
For
us know
sure.
in the comments what your take, on what we thought of the Nets and the Knicks. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree.
Battle of New York.
Yeah, maybe you're lower on New York and higher on lower on the Knicks and higher on the Nets, or
Right.
maybe you're in the same camp as us. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Let us know.
Yeah, now we're going to get into the rumors. So, according to ESPN, and Ramona Shelburne, right, the Warriors and Clay talked a new deal.
Hmm.
So obviously we know at a certain point, right, Clay is gonna get probably an extension from Golden State. There, right now, they did say that like there's no, I guess, it's a slow process, right, in the sense of like there's in no rush to get it done, which makes
Right.
sense because they got plenty of time,
Yes.
to get it done. You don't have to do it on the first day, that they're eligible. And I don't think he's necessarily eligible just yet. Um, but again, it is kind of an interesting spot to be in because, you know, again, they've had this core for so long at this point. I mean, it's basically been a decade.
Hmm.
You feel like it's probably coming into an end within the next few years. I know Draymond mentioned like he thinks they can win two, three more. I mean, I don't think that's gonna happen. I mean,
One.
if there's an over and under on 2 to 3, I would definitely take the under. I think they have the potential to get one. I don't know if they're gonna get one, but I think they have the opportunity to get
They
one
have
more.
one left in them, I think.
I think they could get one more. I definitely wouldn't rule it out just because again, I think they have enough talent, to win.
Until we start seeing Curry significantly decline, I think one is still left.
Yeah.
I feel like that's still up
As
for
long as he,
grabs.
yeah, as long as he's like a top 5 player, like they're gonna have an opportunity to potentially win it all.
Exactly.
Just 'cause that means you have a guy that you can trust, and go to in
For
games,
sure.
right? So, like, yeah, exactly. I think they have an opportunity to get one. I don't think they're gonna get it, but they
I
have the opportunity to get it.
Yeah,
But in
it's there.
terms of the Clay thing, talking about the new deal, um, I think he's kind of in a way sort of a semi like they need him to be really, really good this year
Yes.
in the sense of like, now that Poole's gone and Chris Paul's replacing him, right? Paul's a different player than Jordan Poole.
Hmm.
So I feel like you have to have Clay, be better than he was in the playoffs last year. I think in the regular
Absolutely.
season started off pretty rough and then, from January onwards he was really good, but
He's
in
just
the
taking a
playoffs,
lot of shots, though.
the problem was in the playoffs he fell off a cliff, especially in that Lakers series. It
It
was
was
really
bad. Like
it was
I've
really rough.
never seen Klay Thompson be left wide open in the
Right.
corner, bro. That's
Yeah.
his hot spot. Like,
Right.
come
Like
on, man.
that's the crazy part because part of initially when I thought that Golden State, when I picked them to beat the Lakers was I thought part of it was what are they going to do with Klay Thompson just because at the guard spot his size, his ability to shoot over guys, but he couldn't hit a shot.
Right.
And that's the thing. We talked about how bad Poole was. Clay was also very awful as well, and I think that's something to kind of watch because if he's you know I don't want to say like cooked because or like anything like that because I don't think he's in that spot. But like if he's
He's on the
kind
decline.
of in this weird spot where you don't know what you're gonna get out of him, I think it's gonna be a lot tougher for Golden State, to get out of
They don't
the
have a
West.
two option.
Yeah, because yeah, exactly. Because then that means you don't have as consistent of another secondary shooter alongside Steph. Wiggins can shoot obviously. He doesn't do it volume wise is obviously the same as Clay. Nobody
Yeah,
does it
right.
to the high volume that those guys do it, but they need him to be good. I think if he takes a step back, I think it's going to be really tough. So again, like, and that's going to be something interesting because again, they're in that salary cap spot where there's not a whole lot they can really do anyways. And so it's like it's in a weird spot because if he plays really well, then you're probably going to have to pay him more. But if you pay him more, right, then it's going to be a lot tougher around the margin. So I wonder if they try to get him to take, like a discount, kind of like what Draymond did, where he took a discount, right? Because he ended up getting less than I think some people thought.
Yeah, that was a severe pay cut, I thought.
Right. So I mean, that's kind of something to think about. Because like I said, I think he's very key to that team's
He
success
is
this year.
when he's on fire, yeah, or when he's
Right.
playing like he normally does, like the one that we
Yeah.
all love and
Right.
and love. But when he's
Yeah.
off, it's off because they gave him the Dylan Brooks treatment in the playoffs. That was really hard to watch, honestly.
Yeah, because and that's the thing, like that's where maybe Chris Paul can help in the sense of with those second units, he can kind of find Clay in his spots, and set him up. But
Hopefully,
again, that's where I do wonder because when Poole was there, when he was playing well, you didn't have to worry as much about like what Clay was doing, right? Because there were times the title year, in some of those series where Clay wasn't playing as well, but then it was like, well, you didn't need to worry about it because you had Poole playing really well.
Poole was
You
dropping 20 plus, so
yeah, exactly. But now he's gone. Chris Paul is a different player. Very different player from Jordan Poole. So, we'll see how that works. But, I do feel like if you're Golden State, I think it'll get done. It's just a matter of, how much is it? Because again, like they can't really afford to lose him at this point, because like you have no means of replacing him.
I
He's
agree.
good enough where it's like, why would you replace him at this point?
Yes,
Um, Next up, according to Shams, Jared Vanderbilt, 4-year, $48 million extension for the Lakers, right? So now they've kind of locked up another guy long term, right? Obviously he came to the Lakers in that deal at the deadline, right?
how much was it? Sorry,
4 years, 48 million. So
okay,
basically like 12 million a
that's
year.
not bad.
So yeah, it's not bad. I think I've heard some people say like they feel like that's kind of steep, which I guess is understandable considering probably not going to start. Now that Rui got his new contract, but
Doesn't
at the
do
same
anything on offense either. So
yeah, exactly. Limited offensive player. But again, then you wonder, well, if his 3-point shot gets a little bit better, right? Then that's kind of like where, yeah, that's kind of a steal, right? And he's already a solid defender, solid rebounder, hustle guy. So I don't really have any problems
I
with
think
it.
it's a
And
gamble that'll work out in you guys' favor.
yeah, and like if it doesn't work, you just trade him. Like, because
Exactly,
$12 million a year deal is very easy to move.
movable.
It's not like they paid him 48 million a year. It's
Right,
48,
right, exactly.
yeah, 4 years. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I guess we're gonna get into this new big thing that we didn't necessarily mention last episode.
Yeah.
According to and Woj and Shams kind of split it, but it was mainly Woj
Hmm.
that kind of broke it. Where now the NBA teams are going to, or the NBA is going to penalize teams a little bit more, for resting stars. They made it so that now you can't really rest multiple stars at once, or else you're going to get fined. There are some, I guess, kind of like excuses built in for like if guys are going to miss time. I believe they mentioned 35 years or older, or they played like
Ironic
yeah, or they played like X amount of minutes. I can't remember the exact amount. It's like I think it
stipulations,
might be
right?
like 30,000 or something like that. But
Jeez.
yeah, so what do you think of it? Because I
Hmm.
feel like it's mainly an attempt, I guess, to kind of like let the guys know, like, hey, we need you guys to play. With all these new TV deals and
I was
streaming
gonna say
deals. Like with the NFL, they got like the Sunday ticket with YouTube TV.
they're
They
on
already did
Amazon Prime. Yep.
Amazon Prime. And the NBA's, I'm sure probably looking at some of that as well, right? And, I think those local stations, right, they have some weird stuff. Like, I think it was Denver, right, where their local station or whatever wouldn't play their games, right? So, like, if
It's
you lived in
ridiculous,
Denver,
bro.
yeah, you had no opportunity to watch. So they're trying to do some things and restructure. And, they need these guys to play because, it's kind of rough when it's a nationally televised game, it's a big game, and nobody's playing. That happened a lot last year
Too
at
much.
different. So I mean, what are your thoughts, on this? And like, do you think it's actually going to work? Like,
Yeah.
what do you?
Well, like for me, like you said, you kind of hit it on the nail. You hit the nail on the head. It's an economic deal for sure. I think it's a warning. They're trying to send out the message. You need to play because people are, out here shilling out money. They want to see you guys play. And if you're not playing, that's not cool. But I think it also adds some sort of legitimacy to it. I don't have a problem with load management as long as it's real. If there's a guy where you can literally tell he's just burnt out and if he's going to be on the floor, playing all those minutes through all those stretches and stuff, then cool. You should be allowed to rest, especially if you're up in age. Because we have to look at the NBA as a different entity because it's separate from the NFL and other sports leagues, MLB and stuff like that. So it's completely different. They have their own set of rules. Like in the NFL, it's not really load management because you're expected to play every single day or every single week that you have a game. Um,
Right.
but like with the NBA, I know their schedule is very rigorous. It's a lot of games. But still, I think, if you're getting paid all that money to play, you should be playing. So I'm not sure, the small, minute details, but as of right now, I think it's a win for the fans, honestly,
Right.
and
Yeah,
the
and
league and as a whole for money wise too.
right. And there's some other like specific things, like for example, like they kind of, I think it was like, guys that are for in terms of like how they categorize stars. It was like anybody who was an all-star or all NBA guy in the last, I believe it's 3 seasons.
Okay.
So, which is kind of funny because then that means like there's like a couple of guys that were like, had that like one random all-star appearance where like
Right.
they weren't really all-stars, but like,
Sure.
something. Yeah, like I think Kemba Walker, right? I think it was 3 seasons ago or something like that was an all star because he was in Boston.
Yes,
So like
you're right.
technically he would have been eligible, for that star thing, even though he wasn't really on a team.
But it's kind of
But
going to be interesting to see what teams it really affects because I feel like it's not going to affect a certain number of teams, but it's also going to affect some others, such as like the Lakers, maybe even like especially the Clippers. I think the Clippers will be cooked with this rule because Kawhi and Paul George tend to miss a lot of time together. So
I think like if you do it, it's a fine. And like one thing I wonder is like, say like with the Clipper, like, and it goes up. I think it can be like 1 million or more or something
oh
like
my
that.
gosh, that's pretty
Say like,
steep.
yeah, but say like for say like the Clippers guy Steve Ballmer's right, like Steve Ballmer, he's got a lot of money, so
Right,
it's like what's $1 million to him?
a dollar,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe
So I
10.
mean,
I don't know.
yeah, but regardless, I do think it's more so something where it's like, let's do this before like it gets really out of hand, before
Right,
we really have to step in and like take
right.
some drastic, action. And again, like,
Smart move.
yeah, and some of the focus is also like specifically for like nationally televised games, or like, if you're resting your guys, do it at home, don't do it on the road.
Right.
Because like again, that happened multiple times. Like I think even like Golden State, they had some games where like Steph, Clay, and Draymond like would all play like in a home game, and then on the road they would rest. And then it's like, oh man,
Yeah, like what
and
would
then
be the
I think
point of that? I don't know.
yeah, and I think it's also like, you had some guys down the stretch of the season, right, when like their teams were done. So they just, they weren't playing them. I think it was like Lillard and Beal and a couple other guys,
Yeah.
right, where like they would have been fined, I think, where it's like
Oh, absolutely.
those guys were resting the last, stretch of the season. So, we'll see what happens. I do wonder like if teams are still gonna find some ways to circumvent it. Um, but we'll
Probably
see.
just lie about injury reports. It wouldn't surprise
Yeah.
me. Like, I mean, because we all know dang well back during like COVID and stuff, some of these guys were entering like COVID health and safety protocols like every week. And it's like at some point, I don't really buy it, especially once the virus kind of died down. And it's like, I don't know. To me, like, especially on the Wizards, like, I remember Beal used to be in and out of that thing. And I was like, I feel like they're just load managing the guy. But that's just me making an assumption.
Yeah, it did say, it does say, under if the rule had been in effect last year, 46 players would have been impacted, right? And like, obviously, I'm not going to name all
Right.
46, of course, but just some names, just to throw out there, right? Trey Young,
Okay.
Jason Tatum,
Valid.
uh, Zion Williamson,
Oh,
Joel
for
Embiid,
sure.
Dejounte Murray, Ben
Huh.
Simmons, Lamelo Ball,
Okay.
Jared Allen.
Huh.
So some interesting names there, right? Laurie Markkinen, Pascal Siakam, Mike Conley.
Kawhi,
Um,
is he on there?
yeah, he was on there.
Okay, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So there's Rudy Gobert. So there's a number of
It's
guys,
a wide
that are on.
variety.
Yeah, DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic. Um, so even like Chris Paul, because I believe he was an All Star. I think
Yeah,
it was last season or the year before.
I think the year
Excuse me.
before, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Cleveland, because he played in the Cleveland All-Star
Yes, he
game.
did.
So, I mean, we'll see where this goes, but I think like you said and like I said, I think it's fine. Like it's a good start. We'll see how effective it is, because like I said, I think some teams are probably still going to try to find ways to work around it.
For sure.
But at the very least now, like, I think it's going to change at least some things. I think you won't see quite as much of it next season.
Right.
And especially like they also want them to play like in the in-season tournament games as well.
Right.
So it's like because I think some people might have thought like well, are there going to be teams that are just going to be like, well, we don't care about the in-season tournament games, so let's just rest their guys, right?
Right.
But it seems like they're not going to be able to. But we'll
I
see.
think it's a good move, in my opinion. I
Yeah,
think it'll help the league economically and definitely strengthen the fan base.
yeah. Or like what happens like say with Wenbanyama, right? Because like
Mm.
I think some people think that the Spurs are gonna maybe sit him,
Mm.
for some games because like they're gonna tank. So I
Ooh,
don't.
that'll be
He's not
interesting.
eligible for anything right now because he doesn't have any accolades. But
Right.
like what if
Down the
he
line.
becomes what if he becomes an all-star this season? I don't think he's
Oof.
gonna be, but like, what if he was?
Hey, it could happen. Anything's
Yeah.
possible.
So, um, moving on to some more rumors, right? According to the Miami Herald, Heat may start Tyler Hero at point guard. So I guess if they don't get Lillard, that's their backup plan. It seems like Lowry's kind of slotted into that backup point guard spot. I
Hmm.
guess that's okay. I mean, personally, I'd rather have Lillard, but again, we'll see what happens. Because according to Woj, the Blazers have done a lot more talking in the last couple of weeks. So I think he and others believe that more of that trade talk will ramp up as we get closer to training camp. Hopefully, it happens, so we'll actually have something to talk about in regards to it, as opposed to kind of like just speaking in hypotheticals
Sure.
because it's been kind of, I'm not gonna lie, it's been getting kind of, a little bit irritating,
Yeah,
having to
it's
like,
annoying.
yeah, having to like kind of like just, I don't want to say make stuff up, obviously, but you know what I mean, like just speaking hypotheticals and
Yeah.
what ifs, where it's like, yeah, that's nice, but I actually want to see it happen so
Right.
we can actually talk about
Yeah, let's just rip off the band-aid and get it over with. But,
it.
in
Yeah,
regards to the rumor, can't be mad at it. I think he's capable of doing it. Just less of a facilitator. I think he's more of a scorer. But like you said, I prefer to have Lillard at the PG. So
right. And according to Brian Windhorst, it was actually the Clippers who he thinks cut the Harden trade talks and not Philly. Um, so I do wonder because again, like it seemed like when that trade request first happened, it seemed like it was on its way to happening. Like we just
right,
kind of assumed it was going to happen, and then it never did.
it was moving
Um,
quickly.
I don't necessarily know. And again, like Windhorst has been pretty spot on, in terms of like his insider
He's a
information.
great analyst or an
Like
insider, like you
normally,
said.
yeah. So like normally when he puts out, like that something happened, like you listen because normally it's been pretty legit, right? Because I
Right.
remember the battle between like him and Woj. I think when it was the Harden Simmons thing in Philly
Yes.
in England, right? And like Windhorst was like, nah, like Harden's going to Philly, and
Right.
then Woj was like, nah, Harden's staying in Brooklyn, and then
Yeah.
lo and
Okay.
behold, yeah, he was traded to Philly. So
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, it doesn't shock me because again, I think the main thing is that if Philly was, seems like Philly was kind of asking a lot. Which again, Harden's really good, so I
Yeah.
understand like you're not gonna want to trade Harden for trash, but like the Clippers are also like they're not gonna be like we're not gonna trade Paul George,
No,
for
it's not
Kawhi Leonard,
equal value at this
for
point.
James Harden. Like
And
that's just
yeah, and same thing with Kawhi. You're not going to
like it's not gonna
trade
make us
Kawhi for like
yeah, that's
James
not
Harden.
gonna make us better.
No.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
if like they're like if we're gonna do that, we're gonna add him to the
Yeah.
group.
They need all three if they want to get better.
Right. But I also understand from Philly's perspective, like we don't want to budge because we don't want to give up nothing. Because
Right.
again, like you also have to weigh the Embiid situation because if you get a horrible return for Harden, right? How does that make Embiid feel?
Yeah. It just wasn't going to work.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we'll see. It was funny because I I thought both deals were gonna happen, but I also felt like, if there was one that I thought was more likely, it might have been the Lillard one, only just because like, you know, just
It's
it just
time.
it yeah, like you know what I mean? Like I don't know how to
I know what you
describe
mean.
it, but it just feels like it just felt like that one was more likely to happen.
More
Only
logical too.
yeah, and like I feel like Lillard has a stronger relationship with Portland, so like I think Portland, and I'm not saying that like the team should just, cede demands to the player, but more so just from the perspective of like, he's
Courtesy.
he's played more nice guy, I think, with you know, Portland, especially because he's been there for so much longer, right?
Right.
Harden's been in Philly for like a year or two, and I know Daryl Morey was his guy, but just I don't think he would have built up the same goodwill, especially because, there were times where like, hey, one of the reasons why we didn't go as far is because you didn't necessarily come through, for us. So
There you go.
yeah, but I don't know.
Two-way street, man.
Yeah, moving on. We got some not so great news for New Orleans. So Jose Alvarado sprained his ankle, so his training
Ah.
camp availability is going to be in doubt. I'm not saying this is a make or break thing. So it doesn't seem like they know how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's never really necessarily great. But we'll see.
But when you do have a sprained ankle, if obviously we're not doctors, but it's on the lesser degree, versus like a hairline fracture or something like that, or broken foot, or an Achilles. So I'm sure he'll be back, but it's still unfortunate, like you
It's
said.
already not great because again, if you're New Orleans, right, like you
Health,
can't afford to have too many injuries. We talked
exactly.
about them, when we covered them, right? Like
Yes,
the thing for them is health, right? Because if
yes,
they can be healthy and have most of their guys playing, they're gonna be, I think, a really good team.
I
But
agree.
again, having injuries already and we haven't even gotten to training camp, that's not a good start. Again, that
Right.
doesn't mean anything's over. It's just again, it's something worth noting, just because again, you got to keep in mind this is a team that's had a lot of injuries.
Yeah, and it seems to be their kryptonite.
Yeah. Um. Now let's see. Hawks discussed DeAndre Hunter trade between the Pacers and Pistons as well, but the deal didn't happen. It seems like Atlanta has kind of been in like this interesting spot
Ew,
where,
ew.
they, yeah, it seems like they've been in this interesting spot where like, once they did the DeJounte Murray thing, they've kind of tried, to I guess improve the roster, which again is understandable. According to Jake Fisher, right, they talked to multiple teams, like I mentioned, Pacers and Pistons. They thought about maybe bringing our guy, Bogdanovich.
Okay,
Although I think it is the other one, Bogdanovich,
okay.
not Bojan.
Not
But
Boyan. Okay.
regardless, um, either way, I mean, like, well, I forgot he's on the team, isn't he?
Bogey.
Yeah, is he
Yeah,
on it? Yeah,
Bogey is on it.
yeah. So I mean, like, I guess he'd be like, I guess they would have been traded together.
Right.
But regardless, like the thing is that at this point, it's just like, and we're gonna get into the Hawks once we get into their offseason, but like,
Oh
they've
joy.
been in a lot of rumors, like they've been part of, like Siakam talks, but at the same time, it's like it's rough because they gave up, those picks to get DeJounte Murray. And it's not like DeJounte Murray's been bad. It's
Right.
just, the team hasn't been as good as you would like, Atlanta to be. And so
Right.
it's like, you need to be better soon because otherwise you're gonna start giving away free picks to San Antonio, and that's gonna make them better. And they already got their number one pick guy, so the
Yeah,
last thing
and
you
you
want.
don't want them to get scary because they will be deadly.
Right, exactly. So, and I think like I understand, if you feel like moving on from DeAndre Hunter makes sense because he's been, I think at times kind of underwhelming. I think there are times
Extremely.
like, yeah, I think there are times when you can see the talent, you can see, the potential in terms of what he does, but like at the same time, he's also just kind of inconsistent where it's like, some games he's pretty good and then there's other games where he's just not there at all. And it's like,
Exactly.
where are you? Because I remember I think it was in the playoffs against the Heat a couple seasons ago. He was pretty solid. In that first round matchup, the one where like Trey Young wasn't very good.
Yes.
And the Heat kind of like shut him out, right? But DeAndre Hunter averaged 21 a game. With on really good efficiency.
Right.
56 from the field and 46 from three. That's really good. Um, last postseason, right? 16 and a half a game, 6 rebounds, a steal, 37 from 346. That's fine. But like, they paid him, what was it, like 80, $90 million or whatever it was. And it just feels like, he just hasn't, lived up to what you would like for him to be. I
Especially
don't
with
think
his pick number too. It's
yeah, he was
interesting.
drafted fourth. I think that was the Lakers pick, that they moved around, in the AD deal.
Yes.
And again, like I don't think he's bad, but again, I just feel like
It's
he is
not
kind of
great.
underwhelming. And I understand if you're Atlanta and you think you might want to move on because they have a couple other guys, like AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson. They have some other forwards that I think like they could probably contribute. Maybe not exactly the same, but like those guys are pretty good to the point where like you don't feel as bad, if
Sure.
you gave up.
I
But
agree.
at the same time, it's like and like I said, we'll get into them, right? But now they dumped John Collins, for basically nothing. So we'll see what Atlanta does, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point down the line they do move DeAndre Hunter,
Yeah,
DeAndre Hunter, or at least they try.
me too.
Um, Now let's see. According to Sham, so Dwight Howard to meet with the Warriors, right? Now it's really funny because I remember, I think it was early in the off season or something like that, where like he said he wanted to play one more, or not one more, but he wanted to play another year in the NBA. And I think we were like, I don't think he's going to play another season in the NBA.
Right.
But now he might have another
Lo and
opportunity to
behold.
play, to play, and maybe he plays for the Warriors. Um, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, he would give them some more size and I guess, interior presence, rebounding, shot blocking or whatever. But I mean, at the same time, he's going to be in his 20th season.
Yeah.
When he was on LA 2 seasons ago, he wasn't great. I mean, he wasn't, I think, when I remembered him on the Lakers that year, right? I think part of it was, well, like, DeAndre Jordan was a lot worse. So like it felt like Dwight was like really good, but like Dwight wasn't that great either.
Yeah.
But it was just and the main thing for him was like he just couldn't do it every night. Like he was able to like even the
He's
title year,
old.
right? Yeah, and like yeah, exactly. It's not his fault. It was he was in his 18th season and now it's in his 20th season.
Yeah, it's gonna
I
be the
know he's
same thing over and over again.
yeah, and I know he's balling in Taiwan.
Right.
Um, and I'm sure like, he wants the opportunity to play again and Golden State might give it to him, but like I don't know. I mean, like, I guess it's a minimum contract, but at the same time, it's like, do I expect Dwight Howard to make a big impact for Golden State in year
No,
20?
it's
I
probably
mean,
just somebody to have around.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, not the worst thing you could do necessarily, but at the same time, I mean, like, you got Chris Paul in year 18 or 19 or
Yeah.
whatever it is, Dwight Howard in year 20. If that happens, I don't feel really great about that. I do like the Usman Garuba two-way contract signing that they did. I know he kind of fell out of Houston and then they just kind of moved him, but it seems like he's the type of guy that would fit them pretty well. He's like a 6'8", 4 or 5 kind of.
Yeah.
And again, it's a two-way, so he'll play at times for them during the regular season, but probably not, in the playoffs, unless they sign him to a regular contract. But
Right.
I don't really have too many complaints about that. Like I said,
Me
what do you
neither.
think about the Dwight thing?
For me, like I said, I think he's not like cooked in terms of like he's horrible. It's just, the age. I'm just worried about his age. I don't know what they are signing him with the intent to do. I don't know if they're expecting him to, be coming off the bench every night. Is he just there to be there as a veteran experience? I'm not sure what's going on there because it seems like they have plenty of veteran experience. So I wouldn't think that would be an addition that they necessarily need. I just don't understand the thought process, but at the same time, I'm not, up in the rafters about it.
Yeah, because it's a minimum contract
Yeah,
sign. I've said that before where it's like, you know, it's like it's hard to mess up a minimum contract where it's like if it doesn't work, you just move them or cut them or whatever, and you just move on. Now for them because they're in the salary cap spot, it's not as easy to do that.
sure.
Ideally, I think you'd like to pick up somebody a little bit younger that hasn't played 20
A
seasons,
lot.
but yeah, but regardless, we'll see. We'll see if he gets because again, we didn't think he was gonna play again.
Yeah, I thought he was done. I thought he
Yeah,
was just going to keep hooping in Taiwan.
yeah, but we'll see. So
Who knows,
if
though?
he can come back, props to him. Because
Cool.
again,
Yeah,
that's really cool to be able to do that. I think.
for sure.
I'm not down on that.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
not
that's cool.
discrediting that at all. I think,
No.
we're all for him playing in the league. It's just we're kind of scratching our heads on the Warriors' decision.
So and last but not least, your team, Taj Gibson,
Oh
Wizards,
my God.
one more time. Well, I don't know if he's, I don't know if it's one more time. He hasn't done the Vince Carter thing yet. Of I got one more in me, but again, he'll give some, some more veteran presence and
Yeah.
leadership, to that Wizard squad because now they're in a rebuild. So
Yes.
you can't hate that.
No, I don't hate it. When I first saw it, I was like, WTF? Like, I kind of don't even really care. But then I was like, well, I'm glad we're not taking the Houston approach that they took, in years past, where they didn't have a veteran guy in the locker room and you could just see the immaturity. But hopefully, he can be a little bit, stoic, I guess, and show these guys. You got to be mature in the league because if you're not mature, then you're probably not going to win. But hopefully that rubs off on them, especially because it's kind of interesting. Some of the young guys already have championships, so I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know how the egos are going to go down there, or down here, but it is what it is. But I can't be mad at the Taj Gibson signing. I'm glad we have a certified vet.
Right. That's good to hear. So
Yeah.
that's it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, let us know in the comments, what you thought of our views and takes on the Knicks, the Nets. Because again, like we always like to speak with commenters, and subscribers and all that because
Yes.
we appreciate the support and the because we're trying to grow the channel and provide really good content for everybody involved. So if we did accomplish that, let us know. We really appreciate it. So thanks for listening. And hopefully you have a good week, and we'll see you on Friday.